Welcome, everybody, from the National Cryptologic Museum Foundation. We really appreciate you attending this session today, and you're in for a great treat. We have Tony Sager, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Evangelist. I love that title, Tony, for the Center of Internet Security. He leads the development of CIS Controls, a worldwide consensus project to find and support technical best practices in cybersecurity. Also, Tony and his history, I'll let him talk a little bit more, but Tony and I got to know each other when we were both at the National Security Agency. Tony retired after 34 years and was in communication security within the information assurance professional, and he led a lot of our software vulnerability analysis type programs. And so, Tony, we're very happy you're here, and you've got a great distinguished panel. And so I'll turn it over to you, and you can introduce your panel.
All right, sounds really good. Thanks so much, Mark, and thanks for the reminder. Yeah, the topic today is the workforce of the future. I think Mark asked me to do this because I'm pretty representative of the workforce of the past. Right, so 35 years almost 35 at the National Security Agency, all of it in the business that we call cybersecurity today. Retired and spend my days now with the nonprofit Center for Internet Security, and in a lot of ways, it's just a continuation of public service. So it's a real honor to be here. Folks like, and our distinguished panel, I bet we all have the same story, right? We got to where we got because great people helped us out along the way. You know, we didn't do it heroically alone. And so it's really an honor to give back, to find that next generation to come on and take some of these big national challenges on. So it's really a wonderful time to share some of these lessons that we've learned over, for me, many decades, but for the rest, long distinguished careers here. So the basic theme today, though, is about the workforce of the future. And, I can say that I can promise you in the 70s, 80s, 90s, we were working really hard. The adversaries were really determined. The issues were really complex, but it pales in comparison to what's going on today, right? The speed of how things change, everyone's our friend, everyone's our rival, all at the same time. The technology is changing faster than any of us can appreciate it. And so the demands on the mission, and therefore the demands on the people that execute mission, are greater than ever. And in the business of cybersecurity, we talk all day about technology and advanced algorithms and threat intelligence and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, and again, I know all of our panelists have the same experience. Good things happen because good people decide to do things. Good human beings get ideas together, make decisions, find allies, take on really hard challenges. And so that's a big part of this. And so in a more complicated world, you have to have more adaptable, more agile, more clever people than we've ever had. And with all respect to those of us that have helped pave the way for the world that we're in today. So today we're going to talk a little bit about a little bit of the learning that we got along the way. Each panelist will get, if you don't mind, say 3 to 5 minutes to introduce yourselves, your perspective on the topic of the workforce composition, diversity, how to bring all the best minds together on some of the hardest problems this nation has. Give each of you a chance to go through that and just give the audience a little tease of what you've been through and what you've learned. Then we'll go to questions and answers, and we'll go through a conversation about some of the issues. And I'll try to bring out some of these lessons with our panelists here. Now, I believe the staff is on call waiting to hear your questions too, right? This is your time, not our time. We could talk all day, believe me, about the issues that we faced and the mission challenges, but we'd really love to hear your questions. Because again, this is about handing over the reins to a new generation, and the complexity of the problem and the kind of brain power, cooperation, the soft skills, the technical skills it'll take to really achieve the mission and serve our nation well. So let me just give a little bit of background. My context on this, as Mark said, 34 and a half years plus at the National Security Agency. My background has always been in public service. I never wanted to do anything else. My dad was enlisted Army, served in 3 wars. And I grew up in the great melting pot of our day, the enlisted housing on base. And so born in Japan, my mother is a Japanese war bride. My dad is a classic West Virginia hillbilly. And so there's, diversity has been a part of my life forever. But grew up with the notion of wanting to go into public service. And my dad was of that greatest generation, right? That worked really hard, did amazing things, fought the wars that got us to where we are today, and allowed folks like me to go on to college, right, to get an education to try and build a better life. And so with great gratitude to that generation, I get to stand on their shoulders and so forth. But being a part of the technical organization at NSA, I came in, as Mark said, my life was, I used to call it the staring at other people's software for a living, figuring out how to make systems break. And, I did okay technically. But what I found was, I'm surrounded by the smartest people I've ever known. So it took me a while to figure out what could I bring to that job that was unique. What is it that I have? What are my personal skills, my technical skills? What understanding could I bring that would bring something special to the team? And so I hope that'll come out, during discussion. I think all of us have a story that's kind of like that, right? And for me, originally it was intimidation, like from these really smart people. I'm not sure I can carry their textbooks, right? But then finding that not everyone is equally smart in everything, and not everyone, sees problems the same way. And so learning to both appreciate other people's viewpoints, their skills, their strengths, their weaknesses, and then look at myself with a critical eye and figure out what can I bring to that. And so there are a lot of great stories in the missions that I've been a part of people coming together who really saw problems differently, but were united by something. And for most of us, including, our panelists here, it's often around the mission, right? It's mission that brings together different ideas. And sort of, I often said my contribution, such as it was as a manager, was to keep reminding people of the greater good. Right, that we all have a different viewpoint, but what is the problem we're trying to solve? And, let's get to the important thing, not about showing off how clever we are, but about how we collectively can solve these sort of problems. So let me turn the time over now to each of our panelists in turn. Shirley, if you don't mind, I'm going to give you 3 to 5 minutes. If you could give us a little bit of your background, just an incredible story of your career also, and the kinds of things that you have achieved in that. So if you would, please, Shirley.
Tony, thank you. And Mark, thank you so much. I tell you what, when I'm listening to you, Tony, and you said, well, why even be selected to be on this panel? I mean, this is a future generation that we're trying to bring in. I tell you, we have a ton of lesson learned. And I go back to kind of where did I start? And I'm looking at high school or middle schoolers now and kind of putting myself in that place. But my journey actually started when I was in 5th grade. I actually went into a supermarket in my hometown in South Carolina, and it was a prize for me because of the good work I was doing around the house. I have 10 siblings, and we're on a farm, and you can imagine this: 2 bedrooms, and now 13 people in one house, and no running water. And so I got a prize to go to town. Well, this significant trip to town was a change of my whole life, because I saw in that supermarket for the first time, I said someone I idolize. There was a Black female in a blue uniform, never seen a uniform in my life, but I saw her, and she made such a statement to me that I followed her from aisle to aisle. And I said, I gotta touch this lady. I had no idea who she was. And my mom pulled me back and she said, listen, stop watching people. You'll get yourself in trouble. Well, that started trouble for me, because I beelined to the library on Monday, and I looked up every service, and I found that she was Air Force. And I even remember her enlisted insignia. And I said, you know what? I went home, told my parents, this is what I want to do when I grow up. I want to be in the Air Force. And my mom looked at me and she said, that would be great, because someone would finally leave this house. And I went, oh, God. All right. Thank you. But I tell you what that did for me, it made me realize that, you know what? I can dream. I had no idea what I was dreaming, but I was hoping that one day I'll be in a uniform. And sure enough, that was my passion. That was my life. And so I'm not going to bore you with my bio, because that is what it is. But I'm telling you, you students out there, you have a future. It is an absolute amazing future. When I think about not having the ability to even get radio signal in my hometown. And now we can get it on our phone. We can get everything that we want. You have a challenge. Yes, Tony, you're absolutely so right. You have a challenge, but guess what? You have a wonderful opportunity. So I can say this, for me, spending, 22 years in the military, I don't know that I really understood the military as much as I did until after I retired, because things have changed for me. So now, from just working every day, I begin to look at the world at large a whole lot differently. So now I get to touch and feel people. I touch and feel warriors. We started a nonprofit called Willing Warriors, where we have a retreat out in Haymarket, Virginia now. We bring warriors from Fort Belvoir, Walter Reed on a weekly basis so they can actually have time with their families that they would never have had there at the hospital environment. And so the community at large get to taste and feel and become a part of this. And so I'm kind of digressing a little bit from cyber itself, but I think all of this is the connection and the touching and feeling that we get to do, in terms of the opportunity that's out there for us. So I just want to say this: my heart goes out, my arms reach out to you, the students, because I wish, that I was in your place at this time. You're in a mega world, and I'm so excited for you. I am so excited. I'm so glad to be a part of this panel today. So thank you very much for having me.
Oh, thank you, Shirley. That's a wonderful, two lessons from there, right? One was the inspiration into something that was really big, right? That seeing that woman in uniform. But then, and I think I'm sure Linda has a similar story in that once you're involved in public service, there's no going back.
Oh,
right? You can't see yourself in any other dimension. And, I can't count the number of friends who are former military, former civil service, NSA, every government agency you can name. And, we all find a way to keep serving. And it takes many forms, with commercial companies and nonprofits and volunteerism and so forth. But it's, there is nothing more satisfying in a life than to see yourself as a servant of the public. And I think so thank you for sharing their stories. It's a wonderful reminder of, why are we still doing things like this?
Exactly.
Right? Because we feel so, it's so much a part of what we are. And Mark, Laura, all the staff that are involved with with the foundation also. Linda, a little bit about your background also, again, equally amazing accomplishments during a very, very distinguished career, military and civilian.
Great, thank you. And my story is slightly different than Shirley's, but I can relate when it comes to living in a house and growing up in a house with no running water and having so many family members that, you're stacked on top of one another, because I grew up with my grandparents, and my grandparents raised 14 kids. And so I can completely relate with that. Unfortunately, I didn't have the chance of really getting to understand the military, even though I had several uncles that had was in Vietnam, and my grandfather was World War II, but I didn't really understand it to that level. And, my grandfather worked at Fort Detrick, and, that's all we really knew, is that he worked at Fort Detrick. But what I think was a real change for me is when I got the opportunity to join the military, I had already known that I wanted to be, more in the technical side of things. What you don't always get to understand is where, when you start thinking about your high school education, where that's going to lead you, 20 and 30 years down the road. And so I joined the National Guard, and the National Guard was part-time. And I actually spent time in the National Guard and Reserve, so 38 years in total, and retired from the National Guard last year after leading the Maryland National Guard. And, that overall was just a huge job, because I had Army and Air Force up under my command. But when I think of my overall journey, I would have to say that, my technology background really started on the civilian side more than it did on the military side right off the bat. And I actually was a government contractor or a consultant supporting government contracts. And, even though I wasn't, serving as a civilian, in the government. I was in the military, running a dual career, doing systems implementation, having to deal with all the security issues and background. And the unique thing about that is that I did not graduate with a science degree. I graduated with a business degree and found myself, when I started my career, sitting down and programming, testing, and actually enjoying being able to do that. And what it has allowed me to do over the years is to become better at dealing with the functional folks, dealing with the programmers, dealing with the testers, dealing with the security people. And it's something that now is just very second nature to me. So when I'm thinking about systems, or when I'm thinking about just what we do each day, security is the first thing that comes to mind, because I know what happens when it's not put in place, right? I've actually seen it in action when it's not put in place. So when I think about, just the overall careers and what you can look at, even if you decide that you're going to go down the path of getting a business degree like I did, there's a place for you. There is a place for people who have really what I would consider to be the functional skills that can really understand the pieces and parts that may not necessarily be the technical side. And, what I love about it is that we always hear so much about just cyber in general. And some people just, I think you see it and then you're just like, that's too complicated. But if you are good at playing video games, let me just tell you, if you spend any amount of time on your cell phone playing video games, then you can do these types of jobs. I think you would find it intriguing. I think you would find it even more satisfying than those video games. And so I say that because most of us don't think about that, but it is like, you would be able to go to work and do things that you would typically only see in those games. You would get to save the world, right? And that, maybe you may think that that's just too big, but in reality, you can do things that make a significant impact. And it's not just through serving and working in cybersecurity, but you can serve your country in so many different ways. And so I hope that just kind of gets you thinking about all the opportunities that's out there, and you will take something away from this panel today and make, really get inquisitive. And so I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Linda. That's wonderful. And a great point in there. I mentioned my own journey. I found myself, suddenly in rooms of mathematicians. That was my undergraduate degree. And some of the smartest people, and Mark knows many of them, just all inspiringly smart. And found that very intimidating. But, I'm a liberal arts mathematician, I would describe myself, right? Went to a small liberal arts school and so forth. And it took me a while to realize maybe I couldn't carry the textbooks of some of these mathematicians, but most of them couldn't write a coherent paragraph. Most of them couldn't make the case for their work or explain it to mere mortals. And so finding, that role. And, one thing we know from working in around technology, right? The technical best idea often does not win because people don't understand it. The economics don't work. The psychology of, how problems get solved isn't addressed. Human beings feel left out, so they don't cooperate. And so there's a whole range of skills that are required for success in any high-tech field. But it is easy to get overwhelmed by the technology and the acronyms and the wizardry and so forth. But, this is a really important point that we all have to, again, see what we bring, see what the need is, what others will bring there. So, Shirley, from your perspective, so this idea of seeing the world differently, right? You certainly came from seeing the world differently than perhaps that Air Force person did,
Tony,
or some of the first
it looks
professionals.
like Paul did join us. So, Paul,
he did. Okay.
Turn on your video and your mic.
Oh, wonderful! Thank you.
I think he made it home.
So again, Paul Nicholson, background was a math major with North Carolina Central University. And actually, I chose math not because I wanted to be a career mathematician, kind of like Tony explained there, but I chose math because I understood that math was a foundation to answering a lot of other questions and opening doors to other career fields. So it was kind of foundational, and I enjoyed math, but I wanted to know where it would take me. So when I went to college, I majored in math and computer science. And from there, I also enrolled in ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps, because I wanted, I had brothers in the military, and I was very intrigued with the patriotism of defending the nation. And I was really set on serving my country. So I joined ROTC at Duke University across town from North Carolina Central. And I actually joined as a pilot. And but you can't see me, but I'm 6'6".
Paul, I was just picturing you trying to fit into a cockpit, my friend.
And in 1986, the height of 6'6" was a little bit too tall because you couldn't safely eject from the plane.
Right.
And so I was so disappointed they took my pilot slot. And so as God would have it, I decided to choose communications officer, where I worked in networking, battlefield networks, and tactical, all the things that warfighter use at the tactical edge. Organization was very tactically focused, a lot of deployments to go to foreign countries and provide communication for the warfighter. And from moving as a communications officer, that took me through various assignments and eventually an assignment to the National Security Agency. So when I arrived at the National Security Agency, I was working with, again, combat requirements for providing information assurance to the warfighter. And I had the opportunity to work across numerous parts of NSA because NSA has so many products that they give to the warfighter. And I was a great liaison between what the warfighter needs and what the organization that I work for offers. So I was able to be that liaison officer. And so I enjoyed it so much that when I retired, I decided to come right back and do it again as a civilian. And so from there, I worked into system security engineering, primarily for weapon systems, because I had a weapon system background, and then went into enterprise security and working with other nations and security of other nations and how the U.S. shares data with other nations. And that was primarily my background. And now today, I'm the chief product officer for encryption and products and still working with other nations and across the military departments of trying to provide the right cryptographic products to serve their needs.
Thanks, Paul. That's great. And the reminder also, and I know too, but Linda and Shirley would say that one of the things you get in a military career is an incredible amount of responsibility. You know, the chance to work with other nations, the chance to deal with massive projects, countless defense contractors and people, and it's just awe-inspiring the amount of responsibility that you can wind up with. So, Shirley, just let's back to this theme of what you uniquely bring. What did you do you have an early example in your career where you realized you could bring something special to a group, and what you did about that? Because my guess is you came from a different background than a lot of folks did when you started to get involved with these projects.
Oh, absolutely. But I think for me, looking across my career is my soft skills, probably more than the technical skill, being able to bring people together and have a very positive output for everyone. So that working environment that we create, that platform for everyone, I think my soft skill come forth all the time. So I've gone into major projects that were falling apart. And at the end of the day, I've been able to pull people together. And Linda, when you mentioned your business degree, that business is just, it's surmountable when you look across the board in terms of pulling people together. And underneath all that, we talk about cyber and the technology, but there's layers for everybody to be able to pull the pieces of cyber that's needed. So for me, again, it was really more of a soft skill, that human intelligence to bring the group together.
Yeah, that really resonates. Linda, now, you've been involved in many leadership jobs also. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of a team composition? What are you looking for when you're bringing together people of different technical skills, backgrounds, the ways of thinking about the world, different responsibilities, and trying to build a team? What are you looking for, both from the team and from the people when you pull them together like that?
I think that's a great question, because when I'm looking at building teams, I am looking for individuals that, one, are different, right? They bring different backgrounds and different perspectives, because, what I've found over the years is that it's that diversity that really creates excellence in teams. When I have teams they all have the same background, they're all from, one group, and I'll use the military example. When I get a bunch of operators, and when we say operators, these are the operations types that, just seem to be, heads down into some of the plans. They're not necessarily the ones doing the execution. But if I get all of them in the room and I don't have people that have like a logistics background or someone from the cyber capability, I can guarantee you that by the time our plans get baked and sealed, they are completely off base. And so you need to have a team that can look at things from different perspectives. And I think what's helped me over the years, I used to think that I wasn't good enough to kind of have this be what I would consider to be a strategist. But what I've found is that that's really my strength. I am able to kind of see across the landscape. And so when you can get people that can see across that, and, when someone is talking, people intrigue me. So I know immediately, okay, that person is going to be great if we can pull them in and get them engaged. And so it allows me to really see across the organization, pick out the gems. I am very comfortable having a conversation about an overall very high level. Or if you want to get me with someone who is very deep into cyber, oh my God, it does my heart good to have those very deep. I mean, it's a little weird because I can get very techie, but yet I can be very strategic. And I think when you bring and you start getting that, I guess, diverse background experience, you're able to bring pieces and parts as you need it and as things change. And so I would say having a diverse team that can do that, that's when you would usually hear me say that my team is firing on all cylinders. That means that everybody knows their part and they're doing what they need to do.
Yeah, that's a great story, great example. Paul, let me put you on the spot. Have you ever so you come at this? You mentioned starting with a math degree and military background. But I know you've run into situations where you worked for somebody or directly with someone whose cooperation you needed, that they just saw the world entirely differently. And can you give me an example of how you've recovered? I remember seeing you in action, so I know you have some examples where you have to make the relationship work, but you're talking about two people that just completely see things differently, and what you have to do about that.
So let me share a very conceptual point first. So
you don't have to name any names, Paul. It's okay.
Not. Conceptually, for example, there is a whole when we look at the United States the way we are today, there is a First Amendment, the right to protect. And to protect our security, protect our identity, protect our information in the networks. And then you have people in the government who is trying to work for cybersecurity, which means we need to stick our fingers in the network to see where the intruders are in the network. So there's always that balance of how do we get our leaders and lawmakers to understand that cybersecurity, to protect the United States, we need to stick our fingers in the networks in order to help and assist. So there's that balance of question, trying to get people to understand that government cybersecurity is not a violation, or we're not monitoring your conversations, and we're not standing over your shoulders and saying and trying to limit your thinking. So the first thing that I think of is trying to, with anything, how do you connect with that audience? How do I connect with your view, your lens of how you see the world? And if you're looking at your lens of, I believe that I have privacy, then I'm going to say, well, let's talk about how we protect your privacy. So if I'm gonna teach someone something, I need to connect with their understanding of where they are right now, and then pull them in the direction to enlighten that understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. So in conversations where we was talking about that balance of cybersecurity versus privacy and protection, it was about understanding what do you need in terms of privacy and protection, and how does what I'm trying to do in cybersecurity underpin that privacy and protection as opposed to go against it. So the idea, Tony, is when you come up against people that where you have a fundamental strategy difference, is learning how to take off your lens. You know, we all have, like I said, in the government, we have a lens, in the private sector, we have a lens, and everyone has a lens because by virtue of being able to see, we have sight. But we see things from our unique experiences, and that gives us our unique perspective.
Yeah, so it's a great point. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. And to be able to resolve differences, you have to be willing to take off your lens and see the world through the lens of the other party. And then to be able to understand and speak back to what are your concerns. And then from that place, have a dialogue by how the different lenses do come together to create synergy as opposed to being opposing sides.
Mm-hmm. I recognize. So there's some soft skills. Certainly, some of the soft skills that Shirley mentioned in there, right? This sort of empathy, but also this technical understanding of what problem is the other person trying to solve, and how can I reframe what I do in a way that helps them see that, and vice versa, right? And to be open-minded enough, vulnerable enough to say my view of the world isn't necessarily the entire world, and so that takes a pretty heavy dose of emotional maturity, right? To kind of look at all these things as well as to be credible in the field, right? In the discipline. So I think that's a great example. Shirley, back to the soft skills that you were talking about earlier. So I won't name any names either, but I think we've all had the experience where we've worked with people that others considered unmanageable, that they're hard to work with, or they just don't get it, or they just don't cooperative. But give me an example of how you looked at a situation and sort of recovered that, right? Brought someone into the team that maybe others might have given up on, and what you've done to help make them both feel part of and be productive within the context of the team.
I see that quite often, probably more than I would care for. But I think they start with communication, trying to get to know that person and to make that person feel that they are part of the team. Is actually, for me, it's been able to give them credit for little things that they are doing and bringing them in slowly so that the team at large could see little improvement so that they can be immersed into the team, as opposed to having them pushed to a side saying that they cannot be a part. So again, it starts with that communication, trying to understand really where this person is. I find that more than not, that people are in this environment going through a lot personally, family situation, whatever it is. And they bring some of that into the workforce. Not that we want to get into people's personal business, but a lot of it is basically kind of trying to understand where they are right now and work them into the team itself.
Yeah, that's a great point too. It's not just about their behavior; it's their acceptance within the group, right?
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Sort of kind of managing all that to bring them into, again, and I think you would say focusing on sort of basic human needs, right? A need for acceptance, a need for accomplishment, a need to be part of something bigger, a need to have comfort that your family situation is in hand, and so you can turn your attention. And these are, good supervisors do this, as a matter of routine. And we've all worked for supervisors who don't appear to think that way, right? Who don't sort of naturally go to that. Linda, I was intrigued by something you said about strategy, right? You didn't come up as a strategist, but you found yourself as a strategist. I think that's very insightful, because I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and said, I don't get this big picture thing. Either they say it directly or indirectly. They struggle to take that step that Paul talked about, right? To stand back from their own work and see it. Did that come naturally for you? Did you develop that skill? Do you, is that something you sort of train your mental muscles for? Or how did that come about for you?
Well, that's a good question. I ended up working with a gentleman in the defense sector at Accenture who really came up as a strategist. I mean, that was his background. And getting a chance to work with him, he was my boss for the longest time, and he actually is the CEO of Accenture Federal right now. So talk about that. He's and he served as one of the undersecretaries for the Department of Defense a good while back. And when I started working with him, he was the one that really helped me to stop saying that I was not good at strategy, because everything that he was seeing from me, he's like, what are you talking about? And so he really helped me to take the blinders off for myself, because I didn't see myself in that space, because it was not something that I was always thinking about. I was always being, the one that was doing the execution, and the ones that was, sitting at that operational level. And even within my career in the military at that time, that was my role. That's where I was, because I was more junior. And then when you start moving to more senior, and so I would have to say that, once I found out that I was really good at understanding these pieces, I allowed myself to immerse in it a lot more. And it really does, I think what happened for me is that I started realizing that I enjoyed really working at the strategic level, but I also enjoyed diving down to the layers below that. And what that helped me to do is to be a better leader. It helped me to really be able to connect to my leadership team, connect to my teams a lot better. And then, when there was a need for me to be able to give that vision, right, to be able to help people to see what's in the art of the possible, I was one of those ones that they usually called in to help to do that. And I remember it was about 20 years ago, having a conversation with an individual as they were presenting to me this whole presentation on how they wanted to create the service offering on cybersecurity. And they came to me because they were like, if we can get you to understand it, you can help us get everybody else to understand it. So I would say, step into sometimes, what may not seem to be comfortable for you, because I think that's where you start getting a greater self-awareness, but even more importantly, you start expanding into the art of what's possible.
I think in between the last couple of answers here, it's a reminder that, at least in my experience, none of us comes into the workforce fully formed, right? Either technically or as a human being or emotionally or intellectually. And so, and the ones who grow are the ones who kind of see the need, right? They see, they do their best to assess themselves and then say, to become a better professional, what do I need to do? What skills do I need to? And it is no crime to go study strategic planning, right? There's a whole body of literature. Or creativity. People say, I learned public speaking, by the way. My family still laughs at the notion I would stand in front of an audience, but it's a learned behavior. And I learned it in order to advance the mission.
Yes.
And once I thought of it as a professional discipline, as opposed to, if the audience doesn't applaud, they'll reject me personally. No, it's about the mission. And can I carry the flag for the mission? And therefore, and if I'm going to do it through public speaking, then I need to get better at it. I need to practice and do all those things that I never wanted to do when I was younger. So just a reminder I have one more question for Paul, but a reminder, I'll give you guys a lightning round at the end to just a foot stomp, a message or a thing that didn't come up or a last thought that you would like to leave with the audience. Paul, but just playing on that last discussion, any sort of growth areas for you, in particular from that military to civilian transition? I know that's a big step for a lot of people. Did you find that you need to think differently or learn new skills or take on sort of different responsibilities when you made that transition? Or just in general, any point in your life?
Absolutely. Transition from the military into civilian life to me, it had one big obstacle. In the military, we are so rank conscious. And often correct means who has the higher rank, right? That may not be the right answer, but
you're letting out a secret.
If the major thinks one way and the colonel thinks another way, the answer is, okay, colonel, what are we going to do today? Right. So as you come out of the military and you come into an environment where understanding and technology and skills and having the answer, the approach that's valued. So so when you have a good leader, they invite you in to say, give me your input, because I want to be able to get to the end point as effective and quickly as possible. So coming out of the military, I had to work to be more vocal, even when the audience was more senior, to say, I disagree. I think that if we take this approach, it would be more well-founded because they were really inviting that dialogue, but you hesitate to disagree. So finding a political and a savvy way to disagree and curve the audience towards understanding, because you're the technical expert in the room. So when you become that expert in the room, learning how to, in a very positive way, convey your points so that the team gets the benefit of your presence.
Yeah. And reminder to us in leadership jobs, right, to look for the best answer in the room, independent of position or rank. And, we see a lot of that in high technology, right? I have a story I'll very quickly share of the cultural shift to me. What I found was sometime towards the last third of my career, the kids coming out of school often had better and more current and relevant technical skills than the people that were in my current workforce. Now, they didn't have experience in the judgment and so forth, but in terms of like currency of skills in web design and all this stuff, hey, these kids are great. And I remember, this goes back a few years, there was one of the early denial of service attacks on some of the White House servers. I won't give you the details, but I knew we had a team going down there. I had done the initial recon, the team was going back, and I went to see my trusted mid-career GS-14 team leader, Ray. Are we set to go down there? You're going to go down and talk to the sysadmins at WACA and so forth? He goes, oh, yeah, we're taking Drew. I said, Drew? The summer employee, Drew? And I think I'm a hip guy. My kids would tell you otherwise. I'm thinking like I'm a modern, no, Drew. And I look over and I see Drew and he's in shorts and flip-flops, honest to goodness. And I said, oh, we're taking Drew. So this is like a moment of awakening for me. And Ray goes, don't worry about it. No. Drew worked at Cisco last year. He knows the gear that they use down there cold. He knows it better than anybody in the whole division. We got, okay, take Drew, But that was like, but that was a real moment for me, and said, well, that was the best answer in the room, independent of rank, experience. But I had a very trusted, high judgment, good human being that was the team leader, right? That I could count on to kind of manage the politics and, what others might think. And so again, we find ourselves in those kind of jobs as leaders and followers, looking for the best answer in the room. So thanks, Paul. That was a really good one. So let me, lightning round time. I could check in the clock. We're about run out here. Let's see. Shirley, first, any last message or foot stomper you want to leave with the crowd here and the potential workforce of the future?
Yes, just looking at everything and seeing where high schoolers, middle schoolers are, this environment is today. My foot stomper would be embrace your world. You have an amazing opportunity to look at the diversity around you now, not just the people, but also the diverse technology, everything. You have so much of it. You have more in your hands today with your cell phone than we had in a server room. I mean, we have everything. You have it right here in the palm of your hand. So I would say take advantage of everything that you have. Embrace your world.
Wonderful advice for everybody. Linda, what's up?
And I would say just to take that even a step further, it's not just embracing your world, but look for places to serve. And just remember that serving does not necessarily mean what we hear in the traditional sense of putting on the uniform. You can become, a government employee. You can go out and volunteer your time. There are so many different organizations where you can get engaged and serve, because I think the more you get out and experience life, the more you're going to see the opportunities that are out there waiting for you. And when that door opens, and don't stand too close and pray that this one door opens, take a step back, because there may be 3 doors open for you. Walk through that door and let the nerves settle down, because once you've been in a job one day, you now have 1 day of experience. Thank you.
That's great, Linda. Yeah, we all knew, I always say they're so rare that they stand out, right? We all knew the kid in high school that knew exactly what they wanted to be, and that actually happened. wanted to go to med school or whatever. That is so rare. It's not worth learning from. The rest of us have to stand back and look at the opportunities as they come in, right? Let's stand back and see all those doors. And when you're prepared for that and your mind is open to that, then there's no limit to where you could wind up. Paul, for you, any last thought or idea you'd like to leave with this group?
Absolutely, Tony. In today's society, especially for our young people, they often find themselves, especially with social media and being such a connected world, they find themselves often comparing themselves to others. And if you're looking at the bios from this list of people on the panel, and you say they've done all these great things, I would say don't undersell yourself. Your passion to be a part, your passion to be involved will overcome so many shortcomings. Each of us have been in environments where we said, man, I tell you what, I hardly think I belong in the room. But you do bring a unique part of yourself. Your passion to be involved is more than enough. So don't undersell yourself. Have that confidence, step forward, and bring your passion to the problem.
That's great advice. And and we've all been in leadership jobs, right? The smart, enthusiastic participant on the team is always welcome on any team I've ever had, right? You'll find ways to get them more engaged. And let me just wrap up with kind of my foot stomper here. You're hearing the experience of this panel. It's an extraordinary group of people with just decades of great service to the country. But again, none of us were fully formed or whole on day one. And here's my quick career progression. I had my retirement remarks. My career went something like this. Hey, I got a job, any job. Hey, this is actually a pretty cool job. I'm like really cool people. Hey, this is an important job. Hey, this job is important to the nation. And it became, hey, this is where I'm supposed to be in the universe, right? I'm in the right spot. That didn't all happen in a year. That happened over a progression because I followed the advice, of folks like Paul, right? I became excited by it. I looked at all those open doors. I looked at my own soft skills and said, what else do I need to develop? So think of yourself as on the start of a journey as you enter this workforce, right? But if you had this big picture, the strategy that Linda talked about in mind, then everything is open to you. And again, we've all had great lives of public service. And I can't see any end in sight for anybody on this panel. So I'm sure we'll bump into each other again before too long. So thanks to everyone in the audience. We really appreciate your time and attention. We really appreciate your interest in these kinds of careers. The nation needs us, and it needs you even more because you're the ones that are going to be carrying this for a long period of time. So we're counting on you. I want my retirement check to show up very regular, not stolen by some hacker in some foreign country. So I'm counting on you guys to do a better job than my generation has. With that, I'll turn it back over to the staff here, and thank you all very much for having us.
Hey, thank you, Tony, Linda, Paul, Shirley. It so is wonderful to see you folks again. I've worked with most of you, and it's a pleasure to have you on this panel. And on behalf of the National Cryptologic Museum Foundation, thank you for this phenomenal panel. And everyone, remember, you have the opportunity. Thanks, and have a great day.